Okay, hey guys, and welcome to week 11 on the Underwater Realm video blog, and thanks for joining us last week for the storyboarding blog. That went down really well, and we've had a flood of questions in about tips and techniques for actually creating the story in pictures. There's one real major piece of advice there, and that is that the only real danger of storyboarding is that it can force you to think in a two-dimensional way, and film by its very nature is a very two-dimensional medium. You capture a two-dimensional image and project it onto a two-dimensional screen, with the exception of obviously modern 3D cinema. But the real trick to creating a visually engaging film is to take that 2D medium and give it the illusion of a 3D world. At the end of the day, you're telling a story in a 3D environment, and to really draw the audience in, you have really good 3D sound design and really good 3D depth cued images. And so what we're going to do is this week we're going to hand you over to Eve, the cinematographer, and Eve is going to talk you through her top tips for creating depth. Now, the first one of these tips is depth of field, and that's going to be one that a lot of people have talked about these days because so many people are using Canon DSLRs. Absolutely fantastic tools, but the rest of this video is really just about looking at depth of field, why it works, and looking at the alternatives, because it's not all about just having shallow depth of field. There are a number of different ways that you can create depth and add depth into your shots. So I'm going to hand you over to Eve now, and Eve is going to give you her top 6 tips for beginners looking to add a little bit of depth to some of their shots quickly and easily.
Hey everybody, it's Eve here, and I'm sat in the beautiful garden of Realm Studios in Torbay, and it's an absolutely gorgeous day, so I'm going to talk to you from out here. And as Dave explained today, we're going to be going through some basic tips that we use to add depth to our shots. We're not experts, but we just thought we'd give you a few basic ideas as to how we do it and how you can hopefully do it too. So the first one we're going to look at is depth of field. And everybody at the moment seems to be shooting on DSLRs, which is great because you can get some really wonderful depth of field shots. As you can see from our example, this first shot is shot at f22. You can see that the background and the foreground are actually both in focus. This is what we call deep focus. And it's not a bad thing at all. It can be used for a variety of narrative reasons. You can totally shoot this way, that's absolutely fine. But for us, we wanted to add a little bit of depth to this shot, and the way we did that was we opened our aperture right up. And we've opened it right up to 1.4. And this shot here, shot at f1.4, you can see that the background has gone out of focus, and the foreground, which is me, stood in the foreground, is actually in focus. And what this has done is it's really drawn the viewer's eye into what we want them to see, and has separated the foreground and the background. The second tip we're going to look into is backlighting, and this is something that we've been using ourselves quite a lot recently, and is a really effective way of adding depth to your shot. We shot 2 examples in our garden, one where I'm facing into the sun and one where the sun is directly behind me. And you can see in the shot where the sun is directly behind me that what's effectively happened is a line of light has been drawn around my head and around my shoulders and really separated me from the background and drawn the viewer's eye into what we want them to see. The third tip is foreground elements, and these are again a really great way of adding depth to your shot. We shot an example here with foreground element and an example without. And as you can see in the example without any foreground element, Dave's having a conversation with someone. It's a bit bland, there's not really a lot going on. But once you've added just a little bit of foreground element, you can really see how close Dave is to the camera and really puts him in a 3D environment. Tip 4 is perspective, and you might get a script and it might read that Eve is stood against a shed. So we've taken that script and we've put me against a shed, directly flat against a shed, and in this first example you can see that. We've stood me in front of a shed and it's kind of boring, it's not very exciting. So in order to create depth to this shot, what we've used is perspective, and we've just changed the angle of the camera so that it's actually using the lines, the horizontal and the vertical lines of the shed, which actually draw the viewer's eye into what we want them to see. Tip 5 is a really scary sounding one, I think. It's parallax, and it's just a scientific term, and it basically just means how things move within camera depending on how close or how far away they are. So we shot a couple of examples in the garden again. This first one is actually a static camera, and it's perfectly acceptable. It's got some nice foreground elements, it's got some nice backlighting, all those other things that we've already talked about. But what we want to do is add actually loads more depth to this shot. And the way we've done that is we've put the camera on what we call a glide track, and we've moved it across the ground here. And as you can see, what's happened is the foreground elements are actually moving past the camera a lot quicker than the background elements, and this is what parallax is. And it adds loads of depth to the shot and is a really effective way of using a moving camera to add depth to your shots. The last tip that we often use to create depth in our shots is a bit of an oddball, but it's actually something that Hollywood use quite a lot on their really large scale sets. And it's not really something that a lot of people notice, but it is a really effective way of adding depth to your shot, and that is smoke. Now, we shot an example in our garage. It's not a great example because we don't actually have a smoke machine, but we wanted to show you a little bit of how it can be used. So this is an example we shot in the garage. As you can see, this first shot is of Dave just stood in the garage, and it's kind of difficult to distinguish him from the background. But if we add a little bit of smoke to that shot, you can see in this second shot that what's happened is Dave's actually sort of popped out from the background, and it's kind of similar to how depth of field works in a way. But what's actually happened is that the amount of smoke between Dave and the camera is less than the amount of smoke that's between the camera and the wall behind him. And so we've kind of done the same effect of drawing the viewer's eye into what we want them to see by using smoke. So that brings me to the end of our top 6 tips of adding depth to your shots. I hope you enjoyed them and you can get some use from them. I'm going to let you go back to Dave now, and I will hopefully see you all next week for the blog that will be coming to you from our big production meeting.
Okay, so hopefully that's been useful for everybody. Eve said basically all there is to say, and we will see you next week. We've got a big production meeting and we're going to be doing a blog where you'll meet some new members of the team.